Hello, hello, good morning. I hope you had a lovely Christmas. It's Boxing Day today. I am going to continue with my plan to make one video a day over the Christmas holiday. Today I'm going to cover a brilliant book by Louise called The Case Against the Sexual Revolution. It's a really fun book. I think it was published. It was published in this decade, so I don't know, 2022, something like that. It's a relatively new book. Louise Perry has become a kind of semi-famous figure on the right. She's spoken to the Lotus Eaters. She's been hanging out with Chris Williamson. She's got her own podcast called Mother Maiden Matriarch, and she's invited on a whole bunch of different feminists and various different people to talk about, sexual matters and dating matters and etc, etc, etc. She is essentially, this is my understanding, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but she describes herself as a reactionary feminist. What does that mean? I don't know. But I guess, on the one hand, I find it silly, all these, definitions. If you're reacting against feminism, doesn't that mean you're an anti-feminist? But then on the other hand, she does agree with the basic principles of feminism, right? So she thinks that women should vote. I don't want to put, this is a problem when you're making a video like this. You don't want to put words in somebody else's mouth. Okay, so take everything that I say with a pinch of salt. I am not an expert on Louise Perry and what she thinks. There's your disclaimer at the beginning of the video. And by the way, I did read this book 3 years ago. I've just done a brief recap. But read the book yourself if you want to understand what she's actually trying to say. But nonetheless, it's my understanding that she's still a feminist. They're all still feminists, okay? All of these reactionary feminists, or whatever they want to call themselves, the TERFs, right? There's another one. They they're feminists, but they just don't want men going into women's bathrooms and, oh, can we just go back to the 90s? Like, it's this kind of attitude. Okay, fine. But they're all still feminists. They all still think that women should vote. They all still think that women should be in the workplace. They all still think that women should be going to university. They all still think that women should be treated more or less equally. And a lot of these feminists like Louise Perry, they're reacting, and a lot of commentators, to be fair, on the social scene, on the centre right, dissident right, on the internet, whatever, they are reacting to the far edges of this degenerate, dysgenic, cyberpunk. Am I going to start calling the modern world cyberpunk? Yeah, we live in a cyberpunk dystopian hell that we live in. This cultural Marxist hell that we live in. They're reacting to like the far reaches of the madness, but they're not really digging in to look at the deeper problems, the deeper questions, the deeper acts and decisions that have brought us to this place. In my mind, of course, as I keep saying, I am essentially a Victorian, and I have essentially a Victorian morality. I do believe in the vote. I am a liberal. I dislike the way that the word liberalism has been turned into a pejorative for the right. I think this is a great mistake. Our civilization is built on liberalism. I think it's a psyop in the background. They want to turn the right against liberalism so that they can introduce their technocracy, their Elon Musk technocracy, their PayPal mafia technocracy, and their digital ID, and their social credit score, and their universal basic income, and all the rest of it. They're trying to make these things fashionable by saying that liberalism has failed. I do not think that liberalism has failed. I think the core ideas were good, and I think they worked in Switzerland, and I think they're rooted in the ancient Germanic tradition of the thing. I think we made the mistake by giving women the vote. That's where it all went wrong, basically. That's where everything fell to pieces. Why? Not because I hate women. I love women. I care about women. I do not wish to fall into the trap of blaming women for everything. I think this is a huge mistake that a lot of men fall into, because then you're adopting the policy of being a victim, which is very bad. You should not think of yourself as a victim. It's very bad, especially if you're a man. Perhaps a woman can think of herself. In fact, women do think of themselves as victims. Let's just be honest here. But for a man, that's very bad. You don't want to fall into that trap. I think you should take a step back. You should look at Western civilization as if you're an alien from outer space, and you should understand that the women of any civilization are a reflection of the men of that civilization. So if you go to a country and it's full of green-haired, fat feminists, then is it the women's fault? Not really. It's the men's fault. They created the women. And you could say, well, that wasn't me. That was my ancestors. That was my boomer parents. That was my grandparents. They're the ones that destroyed everything. I'm just sitting with the consequences. Yes, there is a truth to that. But nonetheless, you can't sit on the internet saying, I'm proud to be white and I'm proud of Western civilization, and at the same time not accept responsibility for the collapse of Western civilization. You can't just sit there and say men built everything and then not also recognize that men have also destroyed everything. Okay, so we made a big mistake. We gave women the vote, and now everything's being destroyed, and that's our fault as men, as a collective, us and our ancestors together. So you have to recognize that. And I think once you've recognized that, then you can step over the hatred of women. Because ultimately it's not their fault. Okay, it's really just not their fault. Yes, some women are better than others. Some women are worse than others. I think Louise Perry is one of the good ones. She obviously cares about young girls getting raped. The conclusion of this book, The Case Against the Sexual Revolution, is that women should get married. She argues that the traditional solution to protecting women is the best solution. What a big surprise, right? What a big surprise. If you don't want your daughter to get raped, if you don't want your daughter to get sucked into pornography, if you don't want your daughter to have a very unsatisfying sex life on Tinder, if you don't want your daughter to just be a corporate slave who doesn't get married and doesn't have children until her late 30s, and who is debt ridden, if you don't want your daughter to get sucked into all of these things, then you should probably tell your daughter to get married and tell her that that is the best course of action for her, and that is what will protect her. And if you do that, then she'll be happy. So that is what mothers and fathers should be telling their daughters, really. And that's the conclusion that Louise Perry comes to, and I think that she's very good for coming to that conclusion. So there are some women that are good, there are some women that are bad. We should not fall into the trap of hating all of them. There is a dangerous movement on the internet, the MGTOW movement. Men go their own way. And they have made the mistake of essentially just developing a pathological hatred of women. Like, I've seen some crazy videos. On the internet. And the conclusion is, she will never love you. She will never love you. And it goes into like the biology of the woman and the psychology and the way that she thinks and the way that she looks at you and blah, blah, blah. It's essentially you're just dehumanizing them, making out that they're some kind of like pathologically psychotic robot sex who are incapable of love. I mean, this is like some really crazy stuff, but there's a lot of guys that fall into this trap. They develop a hatred of women, and they've got the science to back it up, supposedly, right? This is a huge mistake. This is a terrible mistake. I think that we have to recognize the problem, but not fall into hatred. We have to simultaneously recognize that, yes, women are destroying Western civilization. But no, it's not really actually their fault. If you give a child a gun, then you're going to have a big problem on your hands, right? You give a child a machine gun, somebody's going to get shot, and this is what has happened, right? And as I always say, like my system of morality, just to lay it out again, one more time. Essentially, I think that the man has more responsibility than the woman. It doesn't mean that the woman has no responsibility at all, because some of them are good and some of them are bad. They just have less responsibility. The best way to understand it is the relationship between the father and the child, or the parents and the children. If children are misbehaved, who do you blame? Do you blame the children or do you blame the parents? I would argue you blame the parents because they haven't raised their children properly. Now, that being said, you can have good parents and their children can still do bad stuff occasionally, or maybe they're just bad. Maybe some kids are just born bad and that's the way it is, right? So the parents shouldn't take 100% of the blame. They have to take the majority of the blame, but a minority of the blame also rests with the children. In a similar way, when it comes to men and women in society, the majority of the blame must lie with the men, but a minority of the blame should also lie with the women. That's the way you should balance it out in your mind, in my opinion. So it's not that women shouldn't be judged at all. Obviously, there are good ones and there are bad ones. It's just that they should take a minority of the blame. The majority of the blame for the destruction of Western civilization lies with men. It's our fault. We messed it up. We destroyed it. We should take responsibility for it. If we do not take responsibility for it, we will not be able to fix it. Because victims can't fix anything. The only way you can fix something is if you look yourself in the mirror and you say, I've got to stop drinking. Right? I've got to stop drinking. I've got to start exercising. I got to get a job. Whatever it is, you know what I mean? You've got a problem in your life and your life is rubbish. Whose fault is it? It's your fault. You got to take responsibility for it. And if you take responsibility for it, you can fix it. If you don't, if it's a case of, it's not my fault I'm an alcoholic, it's because the world is bad. Well, kind of is your fault you're an alcoholic, actually. And until you accept that, you're not going to be able to stop the drinking. Do you see what I'm saying? So men really should avoid giving up. Men should really avoid blaming women for everything. I understand, like, it's in a banter type way. Yeah, let's blame the women. I get it. I get angry too. I've lost jobs because of women, and unreasonably so as well. I know what it's like to deal with these people reporting to human resources and their gossip, and that. In fact, it's not even just that. It's just like watching like girls at work. I'm dealing with this right now. I'm not upset by it, but it's just kind of amusing to watch. But watching girls at work just kiss the boss's ass, right? And they get a promotion, and it's just like, it's so obvious what's going on. And you can even say it to them, and they'll just laugh, and they'll be like, "Yeah." Do you know what I mean? Young girl turns up at work. The boss is an older guy. She's like, "Oh, hey," and she gets the promotion. She gets the good jobs. The boss thinks that she's great, whereas really she actually isn't. She's just getting promoted to do everything because she's giggling, and it's just such like blatant bullshit. But guys fall for it, and women do it, and that's the way the world is. And there's no point really getting too upset about it, to be honest with you. What should really happen is just that men and women shouldn't really be working together. They should have their separate spheres of work. That's the better way to fix the problem. So that's how I feel about that. That's how I feel about the MGTOW thing of blaming everything on women. I also not really in favor of the whole manosphere, Andrew Tate, Captain Capitalism, Rollo Tomassi, Tom Torero kind of idea of just enjoy the decline, right? That's the title of one of Captain Capitalism's books. Aaron Clacy, I think his name is. Enjoy the decline, he says. Everything's over. Civilization's going down the drain. Just try and have as much fun as you can while it's being destroyed. That, my friends, is not a good idea. Real men should try to fix civilization, not just hide in the corner. while it's burning down. I mean, I sympathize on one hand, right? There's only so much we can do. But I think the balance is to try to change it, or at least be in favor of changing it, and then also try to enjoy your life, right? That's the balance. Not just to give up on everything and say, oh, it's all over, forget it all, blah, blah. Not to take a nihilistic approach. Nihilism is poison for the soul. People should try to change things, but probably not. It's probably not a wise idea to sacrifice your life completely to try and help or save Western civilization, because Western civilization doesn't care about you. Let's just be honest, right? The reason we are in this mess is because people are awful, right? Sorry, but most people are just awful people. I do not believe in this idea that the majority of people are on our side. No, the majority of people are against us. The majority of people hate us. The majority of people think we're weird. It's only a very small minority that have the actual morals and the principles just to say no to the vax, for example. There's a classic example. Did you take the vax or not? Well, if you did, you're an idiot. And if you didn't, then you have some self-respect. And in England, I think about 5 million didn't take. So not very many white people actually managed to resist that tyranny. The vast majority went along with it. And so the vast majority are just awful people. So do you want to sacrifice yourself for a mob of awful people? I certainly don't want to. I want to just sit on the internet and comment on things and try to push things in the right direction. But, you can only do so much. But anyway, that's a bit of a tangent. The point I'm trying to make is that the manosphere bros they see women's nature, and their conclusion is just to have sex with as many women as you can. And essentially what ends up happening is they just defend playboys. The manosphere has become this playboy defense team. That's all it is. They are encouraging men to act like playboys, and they are defending the behaviors of playboys, and they don't actually really care about ordinary men who work ordinary jobs and who want to have wives and who want to have children. Rollo Tomassi is famously against the men's rights movement. He doesn't want to change the laws. He says it's a waste of time. But the fact of the matter is that we are in the situation that we are in because laws have been changed. Women were given the vote. Women were put into the workplace. Women are given preference at universities and preference in the workplace. Women are given preference in the divorce courts. Rollo Tomassi should understand this. Rollo Tomassi is always talking about how these divorces cause men to commit suicide. Because they marry a woman, she divorces him, she takes the kids, she takes all of his money. He's left with nothing. He might even go to jail if he can't pay his child support. But despite knowing all of this, Rollo Tomassi's conclusion is, oh no, we don't want to change the laws, that's a waste of time. What you've got to do is be more alpha. You've got to be more of a playboy, and then your wife won't leave you, supposedly. That's just stupid. Even great and powerful men like Donald Trump or Putin have had problems with women. Women are very difficult to control. If they want to leave you, they'll leave you, right? The only thing that's going to keep them in place is if the law is on your side. Doesn't matter how alpha you are. Look at Tom Brady. I mean, is that guy not alpha? Really? Is that guy not alpha? I would say he's pretty fucking alpha, right? You're telling me I've got to be more alpha than Tom Brady to stop my wife from leaving me? Like, fucking no way, dude. Like, what the hell? No, you need the law on your side. If you don't change the laws, then society will continue to be destroyed. But the manosphere is against this. They just want to encourage playboys. Andrew Tate made his fortune out of exploiting lonely men. These lonely men in England would call up his whores in Romania, and they would think that they were having a relationship with this whore, and they would send money to the girl, sometimes tens of thousands of pounds, so that she could get a passport and a visa and blah, 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 so she could come to England and marry the lonely guy. But Andrew Tate just took their money. So he's he's made a lot of money. And that's what the manosphere in general do. They make a lot of money out of exploiting lonely men. They always have done. That's their thing. So that's a mistake as well to the problem. So essentially everybody's wrong. Okay, that's my conclusion here. 20 minutes into the video. I haven't really talked about the book at all, but nonetheless, the conclusion is everybody's wrong. I'm right. Louise Perry is a good girl. She's one of the good ones, but she hasn't really tackled the root cause of what's going on. The root cause of what's going on is we gave women the vote, and we pushed women into the political sphere, and this has kind of destroyed them. Women are happier if they're married. Well done. She's realized that women are happier if they're married. Okay. But she seems to be ignoring the fact that women shouldn't really be working in the male realm anyway. They should be housewives. And I think it's a mistake to say that women shouldn't work at all, because women have always worked throughout history. Weaving is a great example of this. Makes me think of, is it Penelope? I'm not going to bother looking. I think it's Penelope. I think Odysseus' wife is called Penelope, but don't quote me on that. The son's called Telemachus. The movie's coming out this year. I wonder how bad it is. I wonder how much they ruined it. We'll have to find out. But she was weaving, wasn't she? She was a weaver. And she was an aristocratic lady of sorts. So women have always worked. They've always made money. Even if they're aristocratic, even if they're rich, they've always made money. So I think it's silly to say that women shouldn't work. The difference is that women would usually work at home, or work in somebody else's home, or they'd work in some kind of service role, or they'd work in some kind of part-time role. They would not be pursuing careers. The career is for the man. This is what men are designed for. They're designed for careers and to run businesses and etc., etc., etc. When you encourage a woman to follow a career, what you are doing is you're saying, well, go to university, get into debt, and then go and work in a corporation to try and get promoted, and then get married when you're like 40. And it just doesn't work. It's a recipe for chaos and disorder and unhappiness. Because it's very difficult for a woman to get married once she's past the wall, once she's past 30. Sorry, ladies. I like girls that are in their 30s because I'm an older guy, so I don't want to just offend the listeners. So I mean, if you're in your 30s or your 40s, you need to get a guy that's in his 30s or his 40s, which maybe you can do, but you're not. But the point is, women are more beautiful. The younger they are, the more beautiful they are. That's just the rules. Sorry, I didn't make the rules. Female beauty is related to fertility. Men are attracted to fertility. Women are attracted to power. Okay, men are attracted to beauty. Beauty is fertility. Women are attracted to power because men want a girl that's going to give them children. Women want a guy that's going to protect and maintain and nourish the children. That is what's going on. So men are always going to be attracted to younger women because they're fertile. Women will usually be attracted to a man that's slightly older than them. Not very much older than them, though. This is a myth also spread by the manosphere, spread by people like Rollo Tomasi. You've got a bunch of aging pickup artists out there, right? And they want to convince themselves and convince the audience that they're still attractive and they're still pulling hot women. And so they are promoting this idea that young women are attracted to older men, whereas really they're not, because young women like young men. I mean, this is just the way it is. This is the way it's always been. Your eyes are not deceiving you. It is certainly true that some women like older men and they find them attractive, maybe because they got daddy issues, maybe because they just fall in love, maybe they just click, right? They just get on with this older guy. Sometimes it doesn't have to be about money or whatever. So it's certainly true that it can happen, but it's the exception that proves the rule. Okay, guys. So if you're a young guy and you're thinking, "Oh, I'll just wait till I'm 40 or whatever," find a wife. That's a huge mistake. Don't do that. Find a wife when you're young. Just like we should live in a world where like the guy's like 25 and the girl's like 20 and they get married and they have kids, and that should be it. Bush, sorted. That is normality for Western civilization. That is how things should be. I mean, if we really, really, really want to get into it, we have to acknowledge that the Anglo-Saxon method of reproducing is essentially the man would leave home at about 14. He would work, he would make money, and then he'd buy his own land. And once he's got his own land, he'd get a wife. And he'd have some children, and the cycle would repeat. This is kind of what's programmed into our brains. And anybody who talks about sexual relationships should kind of be talking about this. They should be viewing the whole thing from an anthropological point of view, because everybody's confused about what the hell is going on. Well, you need to have your own job. Ideally, you should have your own business, actually. In fact, the whole boomer concept of having a career is a mistake. If you go back before the 60s, if you look into the 50s, the 40s, the 20s, skip the 30s for some reason, but if you go back, most men would work for themselves. The ideal, certainly in the Victorian period or whatever, and before, throughout English history, the ideal has always been for the man to own his own land, own his own house, and own his own business, right? You own your property, you own your business, you work for yourself. Even in the medieval period, working a job was considered to be something that a young man does. You work a job and you work as an apprentice, you learn the trade, you make some money, and then you go out on your own. Because nobody wants to work for somebody else. Working for somebody else sucks. The number one problem at work is always the boss. He's always the boss. The boss is always an asshole, and it always sucks. And it is not natural for us to spend a lifetime working for somebody else. It's just not normal. It's taken for granted now, but it's not normal. I think nowadays only about 10% are self-employed. I was self-employed once, but it wasn't really much of a self-employment because I had a contract, and it was just kind of a scam because they didn't want to give me a job. So it's like, it was basically like working a job, but I was self-employed, but whatever. Only about 10% of the population are self-employed these days. But really it should be 80%. Really, in order to be a man, okay, you should own your own property and you should be self-employed. That's the standard. And then you should get a wife, and then you should have children, and then the cycle should repeat. That is the standard, my dear friends. So if you're confused about what's going on in the world, that's the standard. That's the standard that we should return to. That's the standard that makes people happy. It's all about property at the end of the day. It's all about the ownership of property. Who owns the property and who doesn't own the property? This is the question. A lot of people out there are complaining about wages. They want to get paid more. This is a slave mindset. Oh, the wages. This is a slave mindset. First of all, wages wouldn't really matter if more people owned their own property. Why do you need a high wage? You need a high wage because you've got to pay rent and you've got to pay your mortgage. If you don't have to pay rent and you don't have to pay your mortgage, you're not really going to be worried about how much you're being paid. So if everybody owns their own property, that will lower the need for high wages. You see what I mean? So we got the elites. They're telling us that oh, we need mass immigration because we need cheap labor. Well, you want cheap labor? How about you make a situation where everybody pays their mortgage off and everybody owns a house, and then you'll have cheap labor without having to import labor. Do you see what I'm saying? Of course, they don't want that. They want a slave class to rule over. Because if everybody owned their own house, then wages would rise anyway. Even if people did own their own house, if you don't have immigration, it's just flooding the market with cheap labor, drives down the price of property, drives down the price of labor, drives up the price of property, and destroys the nation. That's what's going on. We should be against it. Men should be standing up to this, but they're not. Why? Because they've been feminized Why have they been feminized? Because women have got involved in politics and they feminized the men. They cut their balls off. But it all comes down to property at the end of the day, my dear friends. It all comes down to property. If you want to talk about the sexual relationship between men and women, you've got to understand the man should own his own property, he should run his own business, and then he should get a wife, and then he should get kids. And that is the golden standard that everything should be measured against. I'm not saying that everybody can do that. Obviously, we've got to muddle through and, do the best we can. But you should keep that as like a measurement in your mind of where you want to be and what you want to be doing. You spend your whole life working for somebody else, you're just broken. It's awful. It sucks. That's why I change my job every couple of years. Like, I don't want to spend... Can you imagine? Like, I work with some people and they just tell me they've been in this place for 20 years, 30 years. I'm just like, what? You've been working in this... They left school, they went and worked in a factory, and they've been there for like 30 years. Like, what are you talking about? Like, at least if you change your job every year, there's some variety. Like, you've got a different boss being the arsehole. You got to deal with a different arsehole. It's not the same arsehole, it's a different one. And you meet some different people, and there's a different toxic environment in the workplace. You know what I mean? Get some variety in the toxicity of your life. So, anyhow, what am I trying to say here? We're just going on a ramble, not really talking about the book. It is a great book. I recommend you read it. She comes to the right conclusion. Women should get married. That is the best way to stop them from being raped. This lady, Louise Perry, she went to university. She studied, I think, feminism or something at university. She ended up working in a rape crisis center after university, trying to help women that have been raped. And that is where she came to the conclusion that the best way to defend women and stop them from being abused is for them to get married. So she comes from a feminist background. She's coming to the conclusion that all feminists really should come to, which is that they want to empower women. Well, how do you empower a woman? If a woman is a wife and she's got children, she's empowered because she controls her husband and she controls her children. Like, if you're a woman and you want to boss men around, how about you just have a son or 2 or 3 sons, and then you can boss them around, right? That's how. That's honestly, honest to God, I think one of the reasons we have this bitch, boss, feminist archetype is because these women don't have sons. It's not just they don't have children, they don't have sons. It's probably natural. There's probably like a natural inborn desire within a woman to like boss a younger man around, right? So that's why you're supposed to have children, because then you can just tell them what to do. Do this, do that, and then you're the boss in your home. That's always been the setup. That's the way it works. She talks in the book about the difference between Hugh Hefner and Marilyn Monroe. She starts the book with this because Marilyn Monroe was apparently the first naked centerfold of Playboy. I didn't know that. Hugh Hefner, of course, ran Playboy. So she points out how differently their lives ended. Marilyn Monroe apparently died with suicide. I'm not sure if that's proved or not. Yeah, I just checked the Wikipedia. It's probable suicide. Maybe she was murdered. They say she was murdered because she was hanging out with Kennedy and she knew too much. Who knows if that's true? I don't know. But whatever the case, the point being, she had substance abuse problems. She had many abortions, and this kind of scarred her on the inside. So she had a lot of problems, and she had an unhappy ending. Hugh Hefner, also an unhappy ending, a wealthy ending though. Surrounded with wealth, but he never settled down, and he kind of just made a fool of himself in his later years, to be honest with you. He just became known as this disgusting, dirty old man. And a lot of his former playmates would, tell stories about him and how gross he was, and etc. etc. And this is kind of sad, This is what happens if you become a disgusting old man and you don't settle down and you don't have children and you don't start a family. You're just gonna be a perv, right? You're just going to be a pervy old man. It's not going to be a good position to be in. Being a playboy is a young man's game. It's not an old man's game. So he made a fool of himself. So both of them ended up with dissatisfying lives. The sexual revolution did not work for them. It didn't make them happy. But despite all this, it doesn't seem to me... I don't know. You have to ask Louise Perry herself. Maybe she's changed her mind in recent years. But it doesn't seem to me like she rejects the ultimate premise of the sexual revolution. It seems to me like she's rejecting the effects of the sexual revolution, because she celebrates the pill and she celebrates abortion. And she doesn't really seem to be against sex outside of marriage. She's recommending that women get married, but she's not... Yeah, again, it's a case of like... I don't know, it's like you want to go to the party, but you don't want the hangover. Do you know what I mean? This sort of attitude. I personally... I'm not against abortion. I think that abortion is very much a first world concern. It's something that I think a lot of people, especially conservative-minded people, are just kind of like aghast at the degenerate destruction, the sexual revolution in Western civilization and all of its effects. But they don't want to criticize it directly. They don't want to criticize homosexuality. They don't want to say anything about that. And they don't want to criticize sex outside of marriage and this sort of thing. So they just focus all of their attention on abortion and oh, you're killing children, and it's like you're allowed to complain about that. And because you're allowed to complain about that, you can get really, really, really angry about it. And so all of the anger goes into that. But I think it's a bit silly. I think we've always had abortion. If you look at English common law, if you look at Blackstone, he says that you could have abortion before the quickening, and the quickening means when the baby kicks in the womb. So before the baby kicks, it's not really alive, it's a fetus. Sorry guys, sorry if that offends you. I've heard Peter Hitchens say that by calling it a fetus, you're dehumanizing it. Well, yeah, I guess I am. I mean, before it's a fetus, it's an egg, isn't it? It's just a fertilized egg. Would anybody say that taking the morning after pill is an abortion? Because technically it is. I mean, what's the difference? You're just flushing out an egg that's been fertilized for 24 hours or whatever it is, right? So I'm not against abortion before the quickening. I think this is a first world problem. I think in medieval times, if you had a wife and you didn't have any contraception, maybe you'd have 5, 6, 7, 8 kids already, and then your wife gets pregnant again, and you're like, wow, you're like, I just can't feed this child. I can't feed this child. And so maybe you get rid of it. Would that be so bad? I mean, maybe it's bad, or maybe it's not that bad. I don't know. I don't think it's great. I don't think it's brilliant behavior. But I also just don't think it's really, really bad either. I think it's just like, I don't know. Masturbation, is it good? No. Is it really, really bad? No. It's just a disgusting thing that people do, essentially. So, and of course, in the case of rape, a girl gets raped, she's pregnant, she doesn't want to have the rape child. Get rid of it. What's the problem? And I think also, if you look at ancient Rome and other cultures around the world, even in the old Germanic pagans, they would get rid of the crippled childs, right? If the kid is born and it's a spastic or it's whatever, it's not a healthy baby, they'd get rid of it, because you don't want to spend your whole life looking after a cripple. So, and I agree with this, by the way. Throw it in the river, get rid of it. Why are you placing this burden on two people that they've got to look after this, mummy and daddy? Like, no, get rid of it. So I am actually in favor of killing children. There you go. I'm in favor of killing crippled children. Thank you very much. But it's true, I wouldn't want to look after that. It's only a first world problem. It's only a problem for... Well, I mean, it's not even just a first world problem. It's for a country running on fiat currency, which is what we are now. We used to have a gold standard. When we had a gold standard, people were careful about what they spent their money on. Now we have a fiat currency. The government just prints money for free. Everything's gradually being destroyed because of this. We're slowly getting more and more bankrupt. People don't have valuable stuff anymore, right? You know why robberies are down? Because there's nothing to steal. I feel like I've got to point this out. There's nothing to steal. There genuinely isn't. In the old days, people used to have valuables. People used to have ornaments and things like this, which were valuable. Might have a bit of gold in it, a bit of silver in it. They'd have silver cutlery and things like this. And a thief would come into the house and they'd steal these things, and off they'd go and sell it in the pawn shop or whatever. People don't have this anymore. People don't keep really valuable possessions in their house. Everything's plastic. Everything's from IKEA. They don't have ornaments. Nobody can afford ornaments. The only valuable things we have are technological things. And these are replaced every 2, 3, 4, 5 years or whatever. So we don't have gold. Do you know, like in the past, a gold, like if you'd worked in a company for 20, 30 years, you'd get a gold watch at the end of it. That was bog standard. Can you imagine how much a gold watch is worth now? What are we talking, like 10,000, 20, 30, 100,000 pound for a solid gold watch? These things were given away. It was common for men in London to have gold watches. That's why pawn shops appeared. One of the reasons, because they'd pawn their watch off and then they'd get it back. It's this kind of thing would be completely unheard of now. It's just being insane. Like, what are you talking about? A gold watch? Why don't people have gold watches anymore? Because of fiat currency. Everything's being devalued. I mean, you could make another argument and say it's the overpopulation problem. I guess back in 1910, we had 1/8 of the population we have now. So there is more gold for less people. That's an argument. But nonetheless, I do think everybody's becoming poorer. Everything's becoming poorer because of fiat currency. And so there's nothing to rob in people's houses. And also, socialism is built upon fiat currency. And this idea that you should spend a whole life looking after disabled children is built upon fiat currency. It's a first world problem. Okay? It's a problem that comes with a society that is not serious, because they're not counting their money, and they're not counting their money because they don't have gold and silver as the financial foundation of their economy. So and that's just not for disabled people. I mean, that's for the whole range of civil rights problems that we're faced with now, like the whole debate, men going into women's toilets, and I need a safe space. And there was that girl on Question Time a few months ago, and in a very straight way, she said that she has nothing wrong with her. She had no health issues at all. Was she talking to Robert Jenrick, or maybe it was Matt Goodwin? I can't remember, but she was saying to this journalist or this politician, she basically said, I just can't work because I've got anxiety. I've got anxiety. I can't work. Why don't you feel sorry for me? Just give me the money. Give me the money. I can't work. I feel anxious. Okay, this is a first world problem. This is a fiat currency problem. This is what happens when you run your country on fake money. And why do we run our country on fake money? Because of women. No, I'm joking. But I mean, kind of. I'm kind of not joking. I'm kind of serious. Kind of not serious. Again, Louise Perry doesn't address any of these points. This is the thing, like, you can't talk about any of these subject matters without having the broad range. You've got to talk about everything. You can't talk about sex without talking about money. You can't talk about money without talking about politics. It's all interconnected. This is just the way it is. If you just focus on one subject matter, then you're not going to understand what's going on, basically. But, which is the problem of over-focusing on one subject matter. But, yeah, does she complain about any of these things? Does she understand that socialism essentially is coming from the ladies? It's not completely coming from the ladies, but the welfare, the current mode of socialism that we have these days, which is welfare state socialism, that's coming from the women. The old socialism, or the communist revolution, in which, you know, the workers wanted to own the factories, they wanted to own the means of production. That's the original socialism. That, I mean, that, God Almighty, that I can at least understand. Wouldn't it be great if all the factories were co-ops, and you'd work in a factory and also sort of own it at the same time and take a kind of pride in it? It's not a terrible idea, is it? Not a terrible idea at all, but that's not what we have now. Now we have the worst form of socialism. We have welfare state socialism. We have just people just sitting on the dole. And I've got to go to work, and I've got to work 40, 50 hours a week so I can pay taxes so that people can sit at home and do nothing. This is the burden that I have on my shoulders. And whilst I am doing this, the government hates me, and the government is trying to replace me. And I've got to be very careful about what I say in public, because I'll go to jail if they catch me. And if they ever catch me making these videos, they'll throw me in jail. So even though I am shouldering the tax burden of this country for a bunch of people sitting around doing nothing, I'm still a bad person. This is the situation that we are in now. So I don't see Louise Perry talking about any of this. But the point I'm trying to make is that you give women the vote, they get into politics, they get into positions of power. Women are not good at making money. They are good at spending it, though. And they want to be looked after, and they want to be cared for. And so they start spreading welfare everywhere. They start giving money away, basically. They give money away. They have all these welfare problems to look after everybody. Their motherly instinct is misplaced. And so the women in government give the money away, and the women that aren't in government, they want the money. They're asking for the money. They view the government as daddy. And so now you have women married to the state, and they, you know, single parent mums, or even if they're not single parent mums, they still want their NHS. They want the government to pay for their children's education. And they want their pensions, right? These are the three, like, it's like a trident, yeah? The trident of welfare, held by the devil, stabbing you to death. The pitchfork of welfare, which will destroy your economy. Driven forward by women. I can't blame it all on women, to be honest with you. It's the men as well. And it's a huge problem, and I'm not entirely sure what the solution is, because I am a defender of liberalism, and I am a defender of direct democracy. You guys, if you haven't seen it, watch my video. England needs direct democracy. The one flaw I would say in that video is that I haven't answered how, because I'm blaming the faults of the modern world on women, right? Because women have got into power. Women are soft. Women, they create the welfare state, and they vote for the welfare state. They also, because women are not designed for violence, they don't think in violent terms. They think in terms of compromise and conversation, and so they're not very good at defending borders. And they don't like the kind of men that would defend borders. So if you get aggressive men like myself in positions of power, they will complain to human resources or whatever, and they'll get, the aggressive men get pushed out of the positions of power for being too racist and sexist and homophobic and etc. And so you end up with a country run by a bunch of soft, limp-wristed, feminine men. And so when Axel Rudagabana stabs 3 children to death in broad daylight, nothing happens. And when boats of foreigners are coming over to the country, nothing happens. Why? Because the men have been feminized. So this is the problem that we're faced with. You need to have men in charge. Liberalism is not the problem. Women voting is, because they feminize the men. But I am proposing that we have direct democracy. I think this is the real conclusion of the Enlightenment. I think this will solve our problems. A lot of people want some kind of fascist dictatorship. I'm not even against it, to be honest with you. Like, give me 2-3 years of Mussolini just to clean everything up. I mean, that'd be fine, right? Throw all the foreigners out, ban homosexual. We need a capitalist dictator, really, just come in and just slash the welfare, throw the foreigners out, ban homosexuality, and just drag us back into the Victorian age, right? That's what we need. That's what we need. I'm totally in favor of it, but how do we get that person? I don't know. So I'm just saying long term, but the dictatorship should always be temporary. A dictatorship should be like Cincinnati. You come in, you fix everything, and then you go back to farming, right? You don't want to live permanently under a dictatorship. You want to have your freedom, and I think direct democracy is the best way to have that freedom, because everybody hates representative politics. Everybody hates politicians because they lie, they get elected, they say they're going to do a bunch of stuff, and then they just don't do it, or they do the opposite, and you don't have any say in it. And so I think every act of parliament should be passed down to the people so that we have the ability to veto it, and then we'll be able to trust our politicians and keep them in check, and then the country will be a happy place. So that's my vision. That's how we solve problems. But how do we take the vote away from women? I don't know. We'd have to get them to vote, to give away their votes, which is kind of hard. But maybe it's doable. I don't know. But it's certainly one of the great... I think the welfareism is one of the great flaws of liberalism, and I don't know the solution to it. I really don't. Because you'd have to pass a law, essentially, that if you are receiving benefits from the government, whether it's a pension or whether it's housing support or you're a single parent or whatever it is, child support, whatever, if you are receiving money from the government, you lose your vote. That has to be the path forward, because otherwise what happens is you end up with a large group of people who are living off benefits, and they're voting for more benefits, and then these people retire, and they are a huge voting bloc, and they vote to bring foreigners into the country to work to pay for their pensions. And this is what is destroying our country. It is the boomer vote. The boomer pension vote is destroying our country. It's the boomers, and it's the female boomers mostly. And this is what's going on, guys. So there you go, kind of a tangent. As I said, to try and bring it back to the book, I think I'm not against abortion. Contraception, like, I don't know, like, how are you going to ban it now the technology's here? I guess you could ban it. I just don't think contraception is, again, I don't think the pill itself is the problem. The problem is women aren't getting married. What we need to do to fix sexual relationships, we need to market this book to the fathers, because young women are just stupid, and trying to explain this stuff to them is not going to work. They quite rightfully listen to their parents and their teachers and so on and so forth, but primarily their parents. If their parents are giving them bad advice, and then they follow that advice, and then everything gets messed up, who are you going to, like, whose fault is it? It's the parents. So we have to go to parents, we have to say to parents, stop sending your women to university. Okay, you don't need a university degree in order to get a husband. Okay, you should want to get married in your 20s, in your early 20s, so that you can have children and so that you can have a family while you're young. And if you do want a career, you can do that later in life. There's nothing stopping you. You don't need to go to university in order to educate yourself. You want to educate yourself, buy books, read the books. Now you've got an education. There are plenty of people that go to university, they think they're really clever, but they don't read, and they don't have any idea of what's going on in the world. If you want to be educated, you've got to read the classics. That's it, full stop. If you haven't read the classics, you're not really very educated, regardless of what degree you've got. So, the point being, if women are going to get married and have kids, they don't need a fancy career and a fancy job. So there's no point in going to university, and there's no point in getting all of that debt. The only reason you'd want to do that is so that you could meet a guy at university and then marry him. Okay, I can understand that, but there are other ways to meet a successful young man. The best thing women could do is live with mum and dad. Okay, so then you'll be protected because you're with mum and dad, and you can work some job, part-time or full-time or whatever it is, but nothing too stressful. So you got a bit of money, and you can help, pay a little bit of rent, not a lot of rent to your parents, but a little bit, and you'll have plenty of money spares that you can spend on yourself and have fun, right? And then whilst you're doing that, you can meet some nice guy who's got a good job, and then you can marry him. And this guy is not going to care whether or not you've got a degree or not. Okay, maybe some of his stupid middle class friends will get a bit snobby about it, but these people are retarded, and this has to die. The idea of sending women, if you're sending women to universities, you are sending them into a meat grinder. They have to stop going to the universities. This is how we end this thing. This is how we end feminism, basically. Taking away women's vote, I'm not sure how we do that. That's a difficult one. But we can and should stop women from going to the universities. That should be a doable, achievable goal. Because you just go to university, you get in debt, you fuck a whole bunch of guys, right? And now you've got to pay off the debt, and now you're working in a job, living away from home, paying rent, working in a job, you've got all this debt, you've got all these problems, you're stressed out, you're trying to follow a career, and then you hit 30, and then you're like, well, what's going on? Where are all the good men? I did everything right. No, you didn't do everything right. You should have stayed at home with mum and dad and married a good guy that's got a good job. It's a much easier way of doing things. So I don't think we should get too moralistic. We can't just jump back to the Victorian age. I just don't really see that happening. I think we should gradually fix the situation that we have in like a step-by-step manner. I think the thing that we should really be focusing on right now culturally is just to tell women that university is stupid and it's not for them. I mean, it's even stupid for men, to be honest with you, unless you want to be a lawyer or a doctor, or you're following a degree that's really going to give you a specific job. If you're going to study English lit, don't bother going to university. Just buy some books and read them. You know what I mean? So you really got to have a specific job at the end of the rainbow if you're going to go to uni, and it should really only be for men. The women should stay at home, and you have to market this idea to their parents, because it's the parents that are sending them off to the meat grinder. This is the meat grinder that's destroying our civilization. It is the university debt trap. And as soon as a young woman is old enough to take on debt, she's 18 years old. Oh, you're 18, great. Oh, you can get into debt now, great. Here's a bunch of debt. Here, let us lend you all this money. And they don't even advertise this stuff as an education anymore. They advertise it as an experience. You want the university experience. It's a 3-year holiday. That's how it's advertised. Oh, you'll go there, you'll make lots of friends, you'll have all these experiences. Okay, great. You got to pay for it, right? You got to pay for it. It's a really, really bad idea. And so you have to explain this to the parents, especially the middle class parents. If you can get the middle class parents to give up on university, the working classes will follow, because working class people still have middle class aspirations, even though a lot of working class people won't admit that they're working class, even though they are. That's just the way things are. So university should be for the top 10% of people in the country. Most women shouldn't go at all. Actually, most men shouldn't go, but women shouldn't go at all. It's a meat grinder, and women should just be told to stay at home with mum and dad and work a job and make a bit of money and find a nice guy and get married. And that is how you succeed at life, my dear friends. Louise Perry does not reach that conclusion. Maybe she's changed her mind in recent years. I don't know. It's been a while since I read this book. I don't remember her saying this. I didn't see it in the pages of the book. I'm saying this. I had actually Nina Power. I interviewed Nina Power, who's kind of like part of this crowd of feminists. I managed to convince her to come on my show. Right? And this is what I said to her. I said, like, you got to stop women from going to university. Like, it's a joke. It's a mistake. And she was like, oh. But I'm right. I know I'm right. I don't think we can just jump back to the Victorian age. I think all this fetishizing of virginity is just a little bit cringe. I mean, it's not wrong. It'd be better to get married as a virgin, but I just don't think that's the way things work these days. And if you're trying to push that on people, it's a little bit unrealistic. Maybe, like, I'm not against it, but it's just, I don't know, it just comes off as a bit weird. Do you know what I mean? It comes off as a bit like Nick Fuentes odd. So I don't think we should be too, like, puritanical about sex and all of this stuff. But the goal should just be, the goal of sex should be to find someone that you really get on with. And then you should just settle down with them and get married and have kids in your 20s. That's the only way. Like, that's if our civilization is not allowing men and women in their 20s to get married and have kids and to buy a house, then our civilization is failing. It's failing. And the politicians that run our civilization deserve to be just completely ousted from power because they've let down the younger generation. And this is, of course, what is happening. So anyway, guys, that's enough of a ramble about that subject matter. Thank you very much for listening. Do read the book. It's a great book. And that's it. Thank you. Goodbye.